YouTube. In this video I'm going to continue to share my impressions of moving from a Nikon D750 DSLR camera to a Nikon Z8 mirrorless camera. And in this video I'm going to talk all about image quality and how it was to use the Z8 in the field. And I want to preface this by saying, when it comes to cameras, it's not so much about the gear that you have as it is knowing how to get the best out of the gear that you have. Now, I've just been shooting with the Z8 for about a month or so, just a couple of events, so I feel like I haven't got really good on it yet. But so far I've noticed that the Z8 does respond a little faster, and the images are a little better quality, so even though I wouldn't call it an exponential jump, it's definitely a better camera all around. Now let's take a look at some images. Here are a few shots from my first outings with the camera and the new 70 to 200mm lens. Now, most of the sports events I shoot are done in fairly challenging conditions. Fast-moving subjects, not the best lighting, scuffed-up hockey arena glass, or a volleyball net between me and the athletes. So I'm shooting at ISOs around 3200 to 4000 and shutter speeds around 1/1000th of a second or faster. And as you can see, the Z8 does quite well, and I've got some pretty good results so far. The 70 to 200mm lens is a good portrait lens too. I've also found that in a couple instances, the Z8 and the new Nikon 70 to 200mm lens captured something that my D750s with an older 70 to 200 always struggled to capture. For example, with one of the hockey teams I photographed, there's a tradition where one of the assistant captains gives all her teammates a fist bump as they skate onto the ice. And this is actually quite tricky to capture. I'm shooting through glass, the subjects are moving at different speeds, and they're passing in front of each other. It's actually a difficult shot to get right. But as you can see, the Z8 handled the situation nicely and kept the focus on the assistant captain and her expressions all the way through. And here's another instance. I was positioned behind the visiting team's goal, and I shot this image of the home team's goaltender all the way down at the other end of the rink. Now, I wouldn't call this a great shot, but it's usable. And this is something the D750 and my older Tamron 70 to 200mm lens was not really able to get from that distance. So this is an example of how the Z8 and Nikon's S series 70 to 200mm lens does have some slightly better capabilities. And another nice thing about the Z8, in part 1 I mentioned that you can set up how quickly the focus system reacts to erratically moving subjects and how long the camera stays locked on a subject when something passes in front of it. And here's an example of that working. In this shot, I was focused on the action and a referee crossed directly in front of my field of view, but the camera stayed focused on the players beyond it. Now, in this case, the referee still got in the way and ruined the shot, but the point here is that the focus did not immediately shift to the referee in the foreground, which can be quite helpful in a lot of instances. And then once the referee moves out of the way, I'm still focused on where I need to be. And here's the same principle in action, where the camera stayed focused on the far player, even with other athletes and a volleyball net in the way. Now, is the autofocus system perfect? Well, no, it does miss now and then, and sometimes it'll focus on the wrong thing. For example, sometimes the camera prioritizes the hockey arena glass wall rather than the players beyond it. And the glass at the hockey arena where I shoot is very scuffed and beat up, and this can present a challenge as the camera will occasionally get hung up on the scuff marks and focus on the glass instead of the players beyond it. Thankfully, so far, this seems to be the exception rather than the rule, but I think as I get more experienced on using the Z8 and understanding its dynamics, I'll get better at avoiding this and nailing the shot. Now, beyond image quality, one thing I was wondering about was, would images from the Z8 still look like my image style? Because I do like to create a certain style. For example, I like a little more vivid color, and I like to set my white balance a little cooler, a little bluer than the default setting. It's just an aesthetic choice on my part. And I'm happy to say, once I'd set up the Z8 with my various shooting preferences, the images do look like how I like them to look. It all felt nice and familiar and still my style. So if you're considering making a move to the Nikon Z8 camera, hopefully you found this video and the previous one useful and helpful. But whatever camera system you use, I wish you happy shooting.